You are Locked On Syracuse, your daily podcast on the Syracuse Orange. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
NC State is a team that is actually pretty good in pass defense. Not so great against the run. So, Neil, as a team in Syracuse that likes to throw the ball like crazy, like they're the K-gun offense in Buffalo here, is this a game where you think that Syracuse is going to try to come out throwing like crazy, or do they try to go a little bit more ground and pound from what we've seen?
Great question. And Jackson, as always, thanks for having me on. I do agree with you, and I feel like we've chatted about this offline and maybe even on social media, that as awesome as Kyle McCord has been by and large this season, I do think 63 pass attempts last Friday against UNLV. Was it 63? I think it was 63. Is a bit too much. Now, to put that in context a little bit, Syracuse had the ball for so much longer than UNLV and ran so many more plays that, that kind of skews the numbers a bit. But, and LeQuint Allen obviously was great, but it's not like he had, a 150-yard rushing game. He had, I think, almost 130 total yards, but a lot of that was, as a receiver as well. So to answer your question, I think you're right. NC State's pass defense isn't bad at all. I think they give up around 215, 210 yards per game, which is not bad. But their run defense, I believe, gives up almost 160 yards per game. So, I think it would be definitely in Syracuse's interest to have a little bit more balance. Frankly, if I can be candid, run the ball down and the NC State's collective throat with LeQuint Allen. And, I had been saying this, even prior to the year, just, following, covering Syracuse recruiting, I've always been high on Willis. And he showed, and obviously we want Will Nexon to be healthy and back and all that, but Willis is a beast too. So that's a two-headed monster right there. So I'm not saying they're going to get away from the passing game, but a little bit more balance, I think, would behoove the team, especially because NC State is just not super great against the run.
Yeah, and I think when I say they need to run the ball more, you're going to get a lot of people that are going to roll their eyes and be like, again, they're talking about running the football when they're passing the ball at such a high rate. But here's the deal. Here are the numbers here, and here's why we're mentioning against a team like NC State. NC State is 6th in the ACC in pass yards allowed per game. That's pretty good, but you have to take a little pause for a second because they're always trailing in games, which means teams are going to run the ball against them. So I went a little bit deeper for everyone. And I was like, well, what is their pass yards allowed per attempt? Right? Maybe that's a little bit more of an indicator. And they're still upper half in the FBS. They were top 60. I don't know exactly where they rank in the ACC, but I do know that they are an upper half in the country in pass yards allowed per attempt. So they're pretty good at stopping the pass, even on all these blowouts. Having said that, their rushing defense, it's like a homecoming game for some of these running backs against them. They're going over 100 yards like it's 50 yards at this rate. If you go look at their box score and go look at their running back performances against them. So that is why we are saying, as great as they are throwing the ball, and Syracuse is putting up program record numbers passing, and it's working. It's working. Against a team like NC State, they're pretty decent at stopping the pass. I think this is a game where Syracuse, especially early, has to try to establish that run, because if they're running the ball down their throats, it's over. It's over. I cannot see Syracuse losing this game if LeQuint Allen goes over 100 yards on the ground. They cannot lose because it's going to suck everyone in. You're going to be able to throw right over the top against them. Now, we can go a little bit into the passing offense. And I talked about on yesterday's podcast about Justice Ross Simmons. He is returning really to full form, I would say, according to Fran Brown. He's played a couple of games, but he's like, where's Waldo out there? We can't find him, right? How much do you think Justice Ross Simmons is going to factor into the game plan?
Well, first of all, it's just good to have him back and assumably at 100% or as close to 100% as feasible. I think it just adds more diversity, more options. And, I've written about this on the Loud House site and we talk about it on social media. I think McCord has done a really solid job, strong job of spreading it around to, obviously Gatson had a good game this past week after a couple of quiet games. But spreading around to other receivers. And so, I think Simmons, he's another option. He's a talented receiver from Colorado State, correct?
Yes.
That's right.
Yes.
Is he going to lead the team in receptions this week? I don't necessarily think that, but
Wouldn't that be a cool thing though?
That would be cool. And it was nice to see Gatson get back kind of to his form from the first 2 games. But it's interesting. During the game, I was chatting with some folks on the Loud House Facebook page, and they're talking about Gatson and where's he been and all that. I mean, one thing I would point out is that, coming into this season, opposing defenses probably look at him as the number 1 guy to target, even though he was injured for most of last year. He was, a preseason All-American candidate last year after being an All-ACC first-team performer the year before. So, he gets a lot of attention, and so that attention on him means maybe he's getting less throws to him, but it's opening other guys up. So a guy like Jackson Meeks or, Gill or Pena, obviously, has been having a pretty good year. I mean, there's just other options. And so, but now with kind of Gatson, kind of reverting back to where he was earlier in the year, that's a really important positive. And I think with Simmons is, Justice Ross Simmons as well, they just have more guys to throw to. And, I don't know, did Hatcher even he didn't have a catch last week, I don't believe.
He might have had one. I don't have the box score on my hand. He wasn't really super noticeable.
Right.
But not in a bad way or anything, but it's one of those things when I look at the weapons, it's like everyone's going to have their turn, right? 1 week it's going to be someone. It's like you can count on almost like one consistent player, and that is right now it's Trevor Pena. Pena on any given week is getting at least like 7 to 8 catches. Even Rondé Gatson had a couple of weeks where, he's the number 1 target, but he's kind of been invisible for a couple of weeks until last week.
Right.
Everyone else, right, it's kind of like take your turn. 1 week it might be Darryl Gill with 70 yards. The next week it's Hatcher. And when you get a guy, I think getting a guy like Justice Ross Simmons back, I think it gives him another constant because we had high expectations for him. We thought that this guy could be possibly the number 1 wide receiver, but at minimum the number 2 wide receiver. Mm-hmm. Now, if he's full go, that gives you another, I think, plug him in any given week. You know what you're getting from him.
Oh,
that's
absolutely. Absolutely. And you're right. I mean, from week to week, it could be this, Jackson Meeks had 161 yards, recently, and Hatcher, I'm pretty sure because I wrote about it. I mean, he averages about, I think, 18 yards per catch, which is like pretty good nationally. And obviously last week he wasn't, as much in focus, being focused on as some of the other guys, but he's still a talented guy. And they just
good
have
field stretcher.
Yeah. And again, with, Zeed Haynes out dealing with, personal matter, obviously thinking about him, wishing him well, but he certainly came into the year as another, one, along with Meeks, one of the 2 Georgia wide receiver transfers, thinking that he's going to get a lot of reps. And so he's out and hopefully he'll come back and he's okay, et cetera. But with Justice, it's just another guy to throw to. But getting back to the larger point, Kyle is having a great year and he's getting some Heisman buzz and he's obviously among the nation leaders and total passing yards and passing yards per game and completions per game and touchdowns and all that. But while it's like unprecedented from a Syracuse quarterback standpoint, he 5 straight games with 300 plus yards, which has never happened before, and it's his first 5 games at Syracuse. But I still think larger picture against NC State or just moving forward throughout the season, there does need to be some more balance. I just was looking. I think Syracuse is averaging around 110 rushing yards per game.
Yeah, it's not.
I'd like to see that a little bit higher. And again, Kyle's going to get his passes, his yards, his touchdowns. It's all gravy. And LeQuint shows that he can just take over. I mean, that 4th down conversion that, kept them in the game before they scored to tie it, before overtime, that short 4th down where he was basically, I thought he was getting a tackle behind the line of scrimmage or short of the, first down marker. And then obviously the short run to win the game where he was, just barreled over the opponent. I mean, he's fantastic, but still, between him and Willis and hopefully when Nixon comes back, there needs to be more balance for sure.
I agree with you, except for every given week. I think it's more of matchup dependent.
Absolutely.
I think it really, to me,
Totally.
it depends on the matchup. That is where I have kind of softened my stance on the pass and run balance. If it's a team that can't stop the pass, then with how good it is for Syracuse right now, just throw the ball
Air
over.
it out, baby.
I don't care.
Yep.
But against a team like NC State, a team that's pretty good against the pass, terrible against the run, we got to predicate to the team that we are playing.
Absolutely.
You got an all ACC running back. You got Yassine Willis. You can run the ball down their throat for a little bit. The passing yards are still going to be there. You're still going to get yours, but it's matchup dependent for me. I think this is one of those weeks. Once again, LeQuint Allen goes over 100 yards on the ground. It's over. NC State's not winning this game. Game over. Book it. We're 5-1 heading into Pitt. All right. So that, I think, does it for exploiting the NC State defense.